Thank you. You know, in an age of depressing news, if it bleeds, it leads. Is that not right? I mean, on the news, all you hear about is terrible politics, increased climate change, heat, everything's kind of a negative. And over the last 20 years, but specifically the last 10 years, I've concentrated on traveling the globe, looking at a variety of the most charismatic species on the planet. And I have to tell you, there are animals in trouble, but there's a lot of animals that you think are in trouble that are actually expanding in numbers. And that's largely because environmental groups, NGOs, people that care are doing really good work around the globe and bringing back species that were on the cusp of extinction. So that's a little bit about how I'm motivated. I can't work on books that depress me, so I've tried to find a project or many projects that uplift me, get me out of bed, so I can share that with a bigger audience. And so a book that comes out in a short time, and I never know whether it's going to be in late November or early December, is entitled Wild Lives. And it just looks at animals throughout the planet, as I just said. And every year, I and a friend of mine, Gabriel Jacon, lead bear tours up to Katmai National Park, and we photograph these bears. But this book is looking at all different biomes. And in the Arctic tundra, we start with a polar bear up in East Greenland. And over the years, I've been all through the Arctic, as my top esteemed colleague, Franz Lanting, sitting over here in the corner. Thanks for being here, Franz. This is a Arctic wolf shot up on Ellesmere Island. And on Ellesmere Island, their primary prey is muskox. So both those populations are doing quite well, pretty stable, largely because they're so far north, there's very little interference with their livelihood. Sharing the island of Ellesmere is the Arctic fox. And this is photographed right at 2 in the morning, late in the summer. The Arctic hares are 25-pound rabbits. And here they're standing up, kind of boxing each other like you've seen probably kangaroos over the years. But up in the Arctic, it's eat or be eaten. It's such a harsh environment, and it's remarkable that most of the animals that I'm photographing are largely white. You know, seen or hide from the predators, or in the case of polar bears, they're white because it enables them to sneak up on their prey. So here's an Arctic fox with no feet on the ground, just gliding over the surface in Svalbard, that archipelago of islands north of Norway, and it's got a chick in its mouth. But more and more now, as ice is receding further north and reluctant to come back south, polar bears that need ice to hunt the seals that they primarily feed upon are finding themselves into bird rookeries like this great bird rookery up in Svalbard. So they are changing their behaviors according to what they need. And in other areas of the Arctic, polar bears are doing quite well. Where there's an abundance of ice north of Siberia, they're doing quite well. But in Hudson Bay and a few of the areas where the ice is more tenuous, they aren't doing so well. They're filling their great bellies with blueberries and kelp and anything that they can feed upon to sustain themselves. Now, this bear I really thought had been in a big battle with another bear, but in fact, it was just coated in blueberry juice. This bear is literally standing above me, looking over the top of me at another bear. So it's not even concerned about my presence. There's places in the Arctic where you literally can walk with bears. And if they approach too close, you just virtually pick up 2 rocks and you click them together, and that's enough to dissuade a bear from approaching even closer. This is an aerial shot near Cape Churchill. And it just shows how these bears are just waiting and waiting and waiting for the ice to freeze over Hudson Bay so that, once again, they can return to the ice and hunt the seals that use the ice to rest after they're feeding below. Yeah, they call out for pizza, and sometimes you hear the call. So here, mother is taking her 2 cubs out over the ice. As I say, the ice is becoming the main problem. And in the Brooks Range of Alaska, we're already seeing polar bears and brown bears breeding together. And polar bears have historically came out of the brown bear during the last ice age. So they, in our lifetimes, they may just go morph back into being brown bears. These are beluga whales, and I've literally watched a polar bear from a helicopter trying to dive and hunt beluga whales with no avail. I mean, they almost tease the bear because there's no way he can catch up with a whale underwater. Years ago, I had the great fortune to go and photograph a mother bear with her 3 cubs as they emerged from a den, first time out of the den. And we were walking on foot. There was no fear the mother would come towards us. She's not going to leave her cubs alone. And so we had, with impunity, the ability to get up close and photograph the loving nature of these great predators of the north. Walruses, especially the western race of the walrus, is huge compared to what you would find in Arctic East Canada or in Norway and that area of the world. These animals are hauling out on beaches now where historically they would go to the edge of the ice floe and rest and then dive. What they primarily are eating are clams. Their population is pretty stable at this present time. They're a magnificent, they're a beautiful animal. This is an aerial view over the porcupine caribou herd. And they have the longest migratory route of any terrestrial animal on the planet. They virtually circle the entire north and south margins of the Brooks Range every year. And in this point of view, they almost resemble the flies or the insects that they're trying to escape. They're seeking out the ice during the summer months to escape the warble flies and mosquitoes that thrive on them. So within this book, Wild Lives, and you're just seeing a small portion of the photos. There's over 500 photos in this enlarged book. As I say, I've worked on it nonstop for 10 years, but there are photos that even date back 40 years. So it's just a great project. I love books and ones that have meaning and ones that inspire, inform, educate people. The puffins of Iceland are actually moving further north. As the waters are warming, it's bringing in other predatory fish that are consuming the fish that the puffins normally would feed on. And so we're finding that populations of puffins are moving further and further north. I'm not entirely sure what these little creatures are in this puffin's mouth. They almost look like small, whatever. I just had a senior moment right there, and you were here to see that. At least I'm not Mitch McConnell. Oh, was that too much? At any rate, in the alpine section of the book, we start with mountain goats up in the Glacier National Park. Again, if there's something bothering them, if their populations are crashing, I would bring it up. But no, these are populations that are quite stable. And in the case of the snow leopard, very stable. And in fact, in certain regions like Mongolia, their numbers are increasing. So I went to Mongolia earlier this year, to Ladakh, India, earlier this year. There are other photographers that have much better photos of snow leopards, but as a photographer, I just wanted simply to see them for myself. So I borrowed a 1200 Canon telephoto lens, and that's the only way I could see these cats. I could not see them with my naked eye. Here is a little video of one moving through the environment. And so just seeing a wild cat and not capturing it on a camera trap was important for me. I just wanted to see for myself them moving through. The Ariel sheep is actually rarer than the snow leopard. And these are one of the main preys of the snow leopard, beautiful sheep, and is the Asiatic ibex. And in this image, a snow leopard has just killed a young ibex and is dragging it up a slope. And they are using their tails, as you see, as a way of balancing. That tail is critically important as they're chasing animals down a slope. So here a mother is leaving her cub above as it approaches one of the kills that it has made. So in a very short time, I at least satisfied that, but I would not have been able to get this with a normal lens. It had to be a 1200, and even at that, I'm cropping 1/3 of the frame to this point. So you can imagine an animal the size of a dog from a mile away, and that's how we're looking at these creatures. And this is the closest one that came by. But for me, it was great because they were one of those animals that you always hoped to be able to witness and see in their environment. Otters are doing very well in their environments, and here an otter is kind of looking cautiously towards a coyote. And prior to wolves being introduced into the greater Yellowstone system, the coyote really was ruling the roost. It was the top predator for the longest time, taking down elk and deer that were weakened by the winter. And then we introduced wolves. I think it was back in 1995 or something close to that. And here in this image, you're looking at a coyote looking up at its future. So the coyotes had to really change the way they were adapting to this new top predator that came into Yellowstone. And it has been a great move because the wolves have restored many of the habitats that have been overrun by large herds of elk. And now other animals, elk or moose and beavers, are moving into these areas that were not possible before the wolves entered the frame. By the way, this is not water, this is gin. So as I drink more and more of it, at any rate, these are wolves in Yellowstone. They've adapted quite well. Of course, poaching on the peripheral parts of the park does occur, but a wolf's response is to have larger litters. So once they've established themselves into an area, it's really hard to eradicate them, as ranchers would use the term eradicate. They're great creatures. They belong in Yellowstone and the other parts of the Rocky Mountain West. Here, a couple have taken down an elk and then going for a drink right afterwards. This is the largest grizzly bear in the greater Yellowstone area, and it has just killed an elk, and it's a very clever animal simply because in the fall, when elk are competing for the harem, they deplete their resources, they often get injured, and then the bear just sits and watches from afar until the end of the rut is over, and then moves in and takes the weaker of the two animals. So yeah, in the alpine area, there's a lot of animals to cover. I cannot, in the time I've got, tell you everything about this. This is one of my favorite animals, the great gray owl. I did a book years and years ago called Owls of North America. These were one of my favorite owls. It's sitting in an old birch tree with its chicks right down to the lower right, if you can see it from afar. And these owls are found throughout Siberia and the far north, in Finland, Canada, United States. The spirit bear is a white form of the black bear. It's not an albino, it's simply a color morph. It's got dark eyes, and the local First Nations of the British Columbia coast have revered these animals ever since they first saw them. And so they're not hunted, and consequently their behavior is very, very different. They are very tame to the approach. They've never been hunted, and therefore they just don't have that fear of man. And what's also interesting is that black bears in the same region adopt that same behavior because they're on the same island and they are not hunted as well. So a spirit bear can have black cubs, or a black bear can have a white cub. It just simply is the way they've worked it out in their systems. This is a wide-angle shot of one of those very tame black bears coming up and looking at me with a 24-millimeter wide angle. So I thought that was pretty brazen of it until it turned to my friend next to me and literally put a little bit of nose juice on his lens. This is even a rarer bear than the spirit bear. This is called the glacier bear, and it is only found between Glacier Bay and Yakutat, Alaska, and I've seen 3 different ones over a very long period of time. They're so hard to find because they resemble the big gray rocks that kind of align the shore of this great environment. But when I found them, they are also very, very approachable. This one just stood up and shook its back against a young alder tree. This is a sea wolf. This is a wolf that primarily eats along the margins of the ocean. It eats kelp, it eats clams, it eats starfish, it eats anything it can eat, including sea otters. So it's a very different animal than the gray wolf inland. The other animal that feeds on this sea life all up and down the coast is the bald eagle. And in this particular case, a bald eagle has found a small octopus in the tide pools. And of course, it's going for that. So these birds are very predatory and very opportunistic. Whatever they can catch, they will try to eat. So over the years, I think I was one of the first American photographers to find my way into central Honshu Island and photograph the snow macaques. And every other year now, I lead tours back to these great creatures. They're drawn towards the thermal pools of a naturally heated spring. They've had help. The local Japanese have harnessed the water for themselves, thinking they would have a nice hot bath up in the mountains, but in fact, they get into this water every year in the winter. And they are so approachable. They're irresistible subject matter. And over the years, when I first approached them, there would be an older Japanese pair of photographers and myself, and we'd be there the entire day. Now we're talking about 35 years ago. Today, on any given day, there could be 1,000 people coming and visiting these amazing primates. And the challenge then, going year after year, is how can you find something new? That really is a challenge. And occasionally you can find a different perspective, point of view. There are individuals that really stand out, and this little one was catching snowflakes as they were falling. Literally catching snowflakes. So every other year, Hokkaido is a great destination, not only for on Honshu, the snow macaques, but to the north, Hokkaido, you have the Japanese cranes. I mean, there are designers, perfect designers, subject matter, but perfect for the camera as well as they go through these elaborate courtship displays. Nearby are the whooper swans. These swans are in the Arctic of Siberia, and during their nesting season, you would not be able to get within 100 feet of their nest. And in the winter, they come down to Hokkaido. They're fed by the people, grains, and they are virtually as tame an animal as you would ever find. You can lay on your belly and their heads will hover over you. So it's great opportunities to shoot these guys in a number of different perspectives, environments, falling snow, and so forth. And then we turn to the stellar sea eagle that comes south as well during the winter months. And in late February, when the ice is really close to the north shore of Hokkaido, that provides the access to photograph these beautiful versions of the bald eagle, only they're from Siberia. Red foxes abound on Hokkaido, as do the little flying squirrels. The Ural owls are there. I mean, when I think of Hokkaido, it's just such a great place for photographing wildlife. We all think we want to go to Africa on safari, but Hokkaido becomes a great secondary location for the variety of wildlife you would find there. And in the temperate grassland chapter, we start with the whooping cranes that were almost extinct, and their numbers are slowly and inevitably coming back up, given identifying their range and what needs to happen to preserve these great cranes. Okay, I've done it again. So in the grasslands, of course, bison, there are a lot of efforts to bring back bison in greater numbers. And there's a lot of different groups involved in that. And one day, I'm sure, not to the record numbers that there were before Western civilization came to the Americas, but certainly there's a lot of plans to buy ranches, take down fences, and return the bison to big roaming grasslands of the Midwest. These are the original horses, Przewalski's horse, found in Mongolia. Bobcats in the grassland chapter of the book, and a crane dining on a vole up in Point Reyes National Seashore. And down in southern New Mexico, the sandhill cranes. And wherever I can, I'll take exaggeratedly long exposures. I want this book not only to have graphic moments and great biology, but it's also got to have an element of art. My background's painting and art and design, so as much as I can incorporate longer exposures or interesting patterns or lines, I will introduce that into the book. Here, a golden eagle is coming into a nest, actually within the city limits of Bend, Oregon, in that grassland of the Eastern Cascades. And down south in Patagonia, the largest flying bird, along with the wandering albatross, these great South American condors, are amazingly tame and curious animals. You can literally walk right up under their eyrie, and they'll sit there maybe 100 feet away and look at you and stare at you with no thoughts to fly. They are just a curious bird of prey. Of course, down in the grasslands of the Pampas, in Torres del Paine National Park, over the years, the puma has become ever increasingly easier subject to photograph. At one time, they were hunted mercilessly by the ranchers, and then the ranchers really realized that there may be, in fact, more money in a live cougar than a dead herd of sheep. And so they stopped hunting the cougar, and the cougar has kind of chilled out and has become much more approachable and seen during the middle of the day. They're down there primarily after the guanaco, the largest cousin in the llama family. Beautiful animals right at sunrise as they're being backlit by the rising light. And it's a great privilege to be able to walk with a hunting mountain lion. Now, I've seen one mountain lion in North America in 5 decades, but in Patagonia, I've seen 5 mountain lions in one afternoon. So the guanaco is their primary food. The mother on the right has 4 cubs. You can see 3 of them. You can actually see 4 cubs, but the head of the 4th one's disappeared. She has just made a kill on the guanaco. And then after that, the cubs are playing, chasing each other. And another mountain lion known as Blinky, because it's been swatted by a male lion, but it's a very good hunter. And I've worked with that cat for 2 years in a row, and it's amazingly tame. You can get up to her and her cubs without any issues. Of course, you're not going to walk on top of them. You're still using a 1 to 500, but it's amazingly approachable from that point of view. So yeah, over the years, some of my favorite photos will wind up in the book. I tend not to do books that have a whole lot of redundancy. It gives me a great challenge to replenish and have new photos for the people that actually buy the books that I work on. This is a female bear that has brought her cubs right up to my group while we were eating lunch along a river in the backcountry of Katmai. And it literally is so smart, it realizes that humans can save the cubs' lives, because the male bears, the boar bears, would naturally try to kill her cubs so that she would come in to heat and breed with her. But she doesn't want to lose her cubs. So she literally brings them up from here to the people in the first row, puts them right down in front of us, and then she'll go 100 yards up the river fishing, knowing that her cubs are safe. So brown bears are one of my favorite animals. I've photographed them a number of times over the years. I've done a lot of books on Alaska or magazine assignments that dealt with Alaska. And these amazing creatures, especially the brown bears, they look and act like big dogs as far as I'm concerned. You know, their snouts are longer because they spend an inordinate amount of time underwater fishing. And these shots are just obviously intended to be longer exposures to give a sense of emotion to the moment, if you will. Sudden rainstorm is perfect. With a higher ISO, you can stop the motion of the rain. And I just love the time we are living in as a photographer. And I think Franz and I would both commiserate over the fact that for many, many of our careers, the years of our career, we could not get the shots that we really envisioned. Now, with higher ISOs, better lenses, better everything, we can get photos we only dreamed of a handful of years ago. And of course, once a bear is submerged in the water, they shake vigorously. And yeah, as you see, they just are such a great subject. And these bears are really very comfortable around humans, largely because they have been exposed to fly fishermen for 80 years. And so these are the great-great-grandchildren of bears that reconciled that humans were not a threat to them. And so consequently, you can be very, very close to the Alaskan brown bear, super grizzly, without fear. So one year I used underwater housing to photograph the sockeye salmon. So we lead our tours every year to coincide with the great salmon runs that are coming out of Bristol Bay. Of course, bears are not the only ones that are there during the salmon run. Here a merganser and her chicks are picking off the eggs that are in the water. Here is a helpless, hapless bear surrounded by salmon, and he never caught a single fish because the water is too deep, and the fish were kind of toying with him, swimming around him, but he never caught a single fish. Virtually thousands of fish were all within sight. To get this shot, I'm basically laying on my belly and shooting the bear as it's running straight at me, and then at the last minute or so, I hoped it would lunge on the salmon and not on me. So the subjects are every year I go up there, I see and photograph something new. I just love it. It's something I look forward to every year, photographing these great creatures. And they're doing very well. I mean, the brown bears populations are very, very stable throughout Alaska. And this is a little video just to show you how fast they move. Don't they look lovable? Yeah, I mean, they move fast, and they were surrounding us. People are going crazy, taking pictures of fights like this. And after a fight like this, they just get up and catch fish again. No blood is really drawn on these kind of fights. This little bear, last year, every time we approached it, it stood up and kind of did a little jig for us. Love that bear. In the Savanna chapter, we started in Serengeti, of course, down south into Botswana as the sun is setting during the fall season, where a lot of farmers to the south are burning their grasslands, or their crops, I should say. You get beautiful sunsets over the animals. Here, the first time I went to Africa was in November 1980. I climbed Kilimanjaro, and then later went out into the Serengeti. And this is in Amboseli at the foot of the Kilimanjaro, highest mountain in Africa. Back when I climbed it, there were really sustained glaciers on the mountain. Today, they're just, hints of what was once. On the border of Tanzania and Kenya, there's a beautiful, vast lake called Lake Natron, and it has no outlet. So it's surrounded by volcanoes, and with the rainy season, the rain washes down minerals into the lake. It becomes a toxic mix, but nevertheless quite extraordinary in the color ranges. But in addition, there's over 1 million flamingos that live and nest in Lake Natron, the greater and the lesser flamingos. And so over the years, from helicopter perspective, I photograph them. And again, as I said earlier, patterns, textures, long exposures, all of that is part of the repertoire, part of my bag of tricks. If I can't pronounce a word right in the moment, I'm like Porky Pig. I'm going to switch to something I can pronounce. So these are the greater flamingos. To the north in Chad, where I'll be heading next week, there's a great national park called Zakuma National Park. And 5 million quillas, these tiny little birds, swarm over the bigger birds like the marabou storks. But 5 million, they look like swarms of insects. And of course, the kites come in at the time they're swarming and they pick them off. It's a national park that is very seldom visited. And so the spectacles of and the numbers of mammals and birds are extraordinary. Great crowned cranes are in the thousands, whereas in other locations you would see, small flocks. So it is an amazing place to visit. Crowned cranes flying, and of course they're flying in front of the setting sun. I got several different shots of the same thing. Just focus on the sun and wait. In that same park, and the reason I went up there was that John Juweep, that renegade group from the Sudan that was raping and pillaging, were also coming across the border into Chad and annihilating the population of elephants. And so a co-Seattleite, the co-founder of Microsoft, Paul Allen, put in radio telemetry into the national park and hired what he called the Black Mambas. And over the time that they had collars on elephants and computers and the Black Mamba in the bush, they have effectively stemmed the slaughter of the elephants. And so I got up there, it was still a large herd of 300 elephants, which you would never really see a herd of 300 elephants in today's world. And I provided the photos to the park, and they were counting all the babies now that were within the larger herd. So that was a great project to see and experience a herd of animals that large in numbers. Was too large to photograph in one single frame. This is a drone shot over hippos in a river that's drying up during the dry season. And so now the hippos are relegated to pools that were once part of a river. But what makes it really interesting is that they're sharing that pool with other animals that they do not necessarily like. And hippos, as many of you that have traveled to Africa would attest, are one of the most dangerous animals in all of Africa. But the other animal that's really dangerous is the Nile crocodile. And these guys have to share the dwindling water supplies. And they don't do it gracefully. They are always at odds. And in the next shot, one of the foolish crocodiles tries to climb over the backs of the hippos, and he was bitten severely. And if you've ever seen the pictures, you can see a couple of the teeth of the hippos. They're quite formidable. But crocodile eventually got away and survived. So the Great Migration, of course, I would be remiss without having versions of that in this book. We are loving some of these places to death, and so there's more and more areas being converted into nature preserves. Along with the Maasai cattle ranchers, there are areas where people can go on safari. Despite the fact that there could be a herd of cattle, you also have lions and leopards and all the other animals in there. This is a drone shot over migrating wildebeest on the Mara River. They're frightened as they cross the river, and if they choose wrong, they get pinned up against a cliff, and often that is when the crocodiles move in and take their share. Crocodiles eat once a year, and it's during the migration. Not only are 2 million wildebeest on the move, but there could be 100,000 zebras also migrating at the same time. They're following the rains and the grasses. They're great subjects for photographers, as are the cheetahs and the other spotted cats that you would find in East Africa. The Cape buffalo is yet another formidable animal, and especially if it's an older bull by itself. This is something that drivers and guides are very wary of. And one time we were at the edge of a small waterhole, and suddenly a herd of these great ox came running by, and we were trying to figure out what was the catalyst. Why were they, in fact, running so fast? And at the end of it, there was a pride of lions chasing them. In this particular image, it's a pack of hyenas that had already taken down one Cape buffalo and a calf, and now they're chasing others. So I had no idea that these hyenas were going after such a big game as a Cape buffalo. Here, a hyena is being chastised by a pack of wild dogs. He's come too close to the den site. So they bit him a couple times and released him. They could have torn him apart, but they let him go. And in this shot, a pack of wild dogs are taking down a wildebeest. And for the most part, the book would be remiss without this drama of prey and predator, but as little as I can make it, you won't see too many entrails and blood. Like, for instance, here pups are playing with the head of a baboon. And right before this, it wasn't believed that the wild dogs were going after primates. You would often see primates sitting on a log, kind of watching wild dogs go after impala or wildebeest, and now these particular herd of, or pack of dogs have turned towards primates. Blackback jackals in the springtime. Here's several mothers with their lion cubs. And there has been places in Okavango where a pride of lions have really effectively learned to take down the buffalo. And that, to me, was an amazing sight to see the play, give and take. And often lions are killed during the process of trying to take down buffaloes. So it should be of great comfort to know that in the year 2023, there's a lot of this going on beyond the headlines and all the strife and the worry and all the things that we've been subjected to, COVID. There are still animals out there living their lives and staying in stable numbers. This one elephant had enough of watching these lions breed, and it just decidedly broke it up. Serval cats. It's amazing to see a leopard stalking a prey. And you can see why the leopard is so effective, because with all that, the spots, it just virtually blends in with the complexity of the environment. If it was all one color, for instance, it would be very easy to see. But look at how low to the ground as it's stalking its prey. So leopards, again, are one of the least seen of the big cats, but the most plentiful throughout Africa. Their numbers are doing extremely well, not only in Africa, but in India, Sri Lanka. They are quite widespread as a top predator. So water holes are a great place to get up and close to subjects. How am I doing for time, by the way? I think I'm okay. Somebody's going to take a cane and take me off stage. So this is a water hole in the southeast corner of Botswana. And right at eye level, we're in a container that no animal can get to us. And with wide-angle shots, you have this amazing ability to see and hear and actually get splashed by frolicking elephants at sunset. In the desert chapter, we start with the Bisa oryx in Namibia, again, from the vantage point of a helicopter. Great landscape, light, and subject come together occasionally, and that's what happened with that. In the deserts of Namibia, you have a small viper. Can you see it in the distance? The eyes are pretty evident center right. And it's a tiny little snake, but its prey is the geckos and other animals that cross the dunes. In Etosha National Park in the north of Namibia, or north central, everything comes. It's almost like Noah's Ark. At one point, if you spend the day at a water hole, virtually every animal you can imagine comes in for a drink. We are in the desert chapter of the book, and so platoons of elephants, platoons of Bisa oryx, and once they've drank, then they frolic and dust, and everything waits for them to leave before they come back to the water. That is, only one animal doesn't wait. He comes in, it's the rhino. It's amazing how even the elephant herds kind of give way to the black rhino. It's a tough hombre in that environment. And at that one particular day, 10 rhinos with their calves came in. So the black rhino is a formidable animal, a beautiful animal, but it's also, as one would guess, highly endangered because of the poaching that goes on. These elephants are very light in color because they've been dusting in silica, and then they've come to a dead family member and ran off a pride of lions that were feeding on the elephant. So that's what you're seeing in this image. In Madagascar, a leaf-tailed gecko blends in with the lichen on the rock. So I've done the first English version of Chameleon's book. So I spent a lot of time in Madagascar shooting that, as well as East Africa. But you go there for other reasons as well. The ring-tailed lemurs. They wrap their luxuriant tail around their bodies at dusk. This Sophocus lemur is jumping, and I was so concentrating on getting it midair, I failed to recognize that it has a tiny, tiny baby in its belly. So yeah, the lemurs are irresistible. They're like the friendly monkeys. They tend not to bite. Some of them are a little strange. You know, the eye comes out at night. Very strange animal in the world of lemurs. Staying in the desert chapter, we're high in the Bolivian Altiplano, or the high plain of the Andes. And would you believe it that at 16,000 feet, at 14,000 feet, there are lakes that have flamingos. We think of flamingos as being very delicate, warm, tropical birds, but in fact, they live and thrive in very freezing environments, going after the tiny crustaceans that live in these lakes that have a lot of alkaline. So 3 of the species of 6 flamingos around the world thrive in the arid air of Bolivia and northern Chile. In the ocean chapter, we start off with humpback whales. Humpback whales are, I'm snorkeling, I'm not diving, so I'm just on the surface with underwater housing, snorkeling. This is known as a heat run. The whale in the upper left is the female, and all the males are chasing it and trying to breed with it. And she's swimming very fast. These are the giant rays off the coast of Mexico, and from a drone, a blue whale in the Sea of Cortez. The largest animal that ever lived on the face of the planet, the blue whale. This is the second largest. This is a fin whale, also in the Sea of Cortez. And the largest shark in the world is the whale shark off the coast of Mexico. Unfortunately, moments after I shot the shot, it turned around and gobbled those 2 humans. So yeah, most of what I say is bullshit, just to keep me awake. At any rate, these guys are really, they sieve small crustaceans. They're totally harmless to humans. An orca has learned and is teaching other members of the pod how to ride a wave in on Peninsula Valdez to catch unsuspecting young sea lions. And then it trains other members of the pod. So it's an extraordinary sight to see a beached whale come up, grab a seal, wiggle its way out, and then consume. In the north, I have photographed, I've seen orcas from my bed. I live on a viewpoint overlooking Puget Sound, and there's 3 pods of orcas that come down during the winter months. So they're one of my favorite species because I see them quite often. And in Alaska, they're quite plentiful. They are probably, I can't even imagine, honestly, a predator that could even hold a candle to these things. At one point, there was a great white shark and a single orca coming together, and they thought there would be this big battle, but in fact, within minutes, the great white was dead. It just flipped him on its back, bumped him, and that was it. So these guys, I don't think there's anything that can compare with an orca in terms of being a top predator. But fortunately, they don't kill humans at all. They don't even think about that unless they've been really trained in a circus or an underwater park where their natural behavior has been changed. They're feeding off stellar sea lions. They even learned to eat the sea otters, which are exploding in their ranges. For the longest time before Alaska was bought from the Russians really annihilated a lot of the sea otters for their pelts. But that was then. Now is now, and there's just an explosion of sea otters in Alaska, almost to the point where they're really harming the environment. So the orcas are coming in and feeding on these guys like, gummy bears. What also comes to Alaska during that time is the humpback whales. And the historic low of the eastern race of humpback whale, the Pacific, was down to 1,600 animals. 10 years ago, the number was 26,000, and I'm not sure what the latest count is, but they have recovered. And in fact, most whale species have recovered and are doing very, very well around the globe. That's a good news. Those are good news to hear. The humpbacks are a great subject. Late in the afternoon, their spray is coming up, catching the last light of the day. They have this tradition of bubble net feeding, and they just dive deep. They emit these bubbles that trap the herring, and then they come up with their mouths agape, and they consume the herring, and they do this time after time after time. So every other year, I rent out a luxury yacht, and we go up to Glacier Bay, and we spend a week over the water photographing everything you can imagine. Orcas, humpbacks, sea lions, sea otters, black bear, brown bear. Here, this was just shot. 2 jumping at the same time is very unusual. And in fact, it was so fast that I only thought there was 1, but somebody corrected me and made me look at the photos and said, oh, yeah, there's 2. This is a stellar sea lion happily playing in the wake of a humpback whale, which you often find. They just like to frolic on the pectoral fins of the humpback, and they're just playing, and the humpbacks don't seem to really care about that. And then, of course, the great tail of a humpback as it's diving. In the Galapagos Islands, a booby is looking at me while I'm underwater. The marine iguanas are truly suffering as the warming waters off the Galapagos Islands are really damaging the vegetation below the water surface, which is what the marine iguana primarily feeds on. So their numbers are at risk. This is an American crocodile, and I was assured I could get in the water and it would be safe. And I kept on saying, are you really, really, really sure about that? They said, oh yeah, get in there. So I got in the water and photographed them with my underwater housing, and they literally come up until their snout bounces off the dome port. So I'm kind of positioning the dome port of my underwater housing in between me and this 9 to 10 foot crocodile. Yeah, it does look like your worst nightmare, and it doesn't make me look all that intelligent, but I did manage to get the shots without any harm, and the people were right. And what really is the story behind this is that there's fishermen that have little huts on stilts, and they remove the bycatch of the day's fishing, and they huck it in the water, and these crocodiles have associated the people with food. And so that's why they're coming straight up to me. They're looking for food, and I have no food other than a hand to give them. So I just got recertified a couple of years ago during COVID so I could get into Indonesia and not just do specific specimens of fish, but I wanted the coral and the myriad of fish to be within those photos. And as you know, corals are taking a dive as the waters off Florida and other locations. The superheated water is frying them and bleaching them. And so that is becoming a real problem in the oceans. People are trying to develop corals that would be resistant to the increased temperature of the water. I don't know the end of that. Other people would be more qualified to talk about that. This is a scorpion fish. I did a book called Vanishing Act, so I first got in the water looking for sea creatures that were invisible in front of me, and of course the scorpion fish is one of them, so beautiful in their shapes, and a pair of clownfish, and again, the beauty of the corals behind. And the largest of the seahorses is the leafy sea dragon. That was photographed off Adelaide, Australia, probably 20 years ago. So in the tropical section of the book, and I'm now, do I have like 2 minutes and 12 seconds left? Okay, good to know. I only have 2 chapters to go. So speed talking now. These are gibbons in the tropical forests of Kaziranga in India. My favorite macaque, my favorite monkey now is the Celotes macaques. They're very, very nice little monkeys. They'll jump on your head, sit on your head, but they don't bite. That's the critical thing. They won't bite. So they see their own reflection in the wide angle of the lens, and so they are reacting to that. One of the smallest primates is the tarsier. It's got a little hand just like mine, and they live in the same environment as the macaques. In Kaziranga, the great one-horned Indian rhino population is increasing, highly endangered, but the numbers are up and up and up. And again, it just takes a concerted effort by environmentalists and forest rangers keeping poachers at bay. Tigers are doing well. They're increasing everywhere in India. And again, they are identifying tracts of land that have historically not been preserved. And as long as there's food, like the spotted deer or the sambar, they can put tigers from other parks in there. The tigers breed well in an environment where there's food. And so their numbers are coming up virtually everywhere. Great. Hornbill, wreath hornbills. I mean, the tropical regions of the book has so much color. Virtually raining bat shit over me when I was getting this shot. I kept on thinking, is it starting to rain? No, it's the bats coming out of a cave peeing on you. Okay. 5 million of these bats come out of a cave in central Thailand at a time. I kind of gerrymandered a pole that had a tripod head and a wheel and put a camera with a wide angle that I started clicking it. Every second it would take a picture, but I'm still 12 feet away, and I ran it under these Komodo dragons. We thought that Komodo dragons had a toxin in their saliva that could infect you if you were ever to get bit. But now, we now know that they have a poison. They're like a cobra. And so they'll bite a goat or a cow or whatever and then just slowly follow it until it drops. These are 9-foot lizards. Chimpanzees, and of course the mountain gorillas. So again, the mountain gorillas populations are stable, if not growing, in several of the countries: Rwanda, Uganda, the Congo. And when they're habituated, they are an amazing animal to photograph. This is virtually right at my feet with a 24mm wide angle. And they're just looking at you curiously. Staying in the tropical section, we head south to South America. Red and blue macaws in front of that dark background is a crater. And here we have hyacinth macaws at a nest. Mountain toucan, one of the most extraordinarily beautiful variety of colors on a single bird I've ever seen. Ocelots in the rainforests, and of course the jaguar now has become a very visible and photographable animal within the last 15 or 20 years. I was on one of the first excursions to experiment to see if we could get him. It was the only boat on the river for 4 days, and now there's a lot of people going down and getting great, great shots of what was once a myth of the forest, is the jaguar. They're feeding along these rivers in the Pantanal for caiman. They like caiman. And they're a water-based cat. They also spend a lot of time in the water. Here is a male trying to breed with a female heading down one of the tributaries of the river. They share the river with the giant river otter, one of the top predators in the whole Amazonia, and pink river dolphins in the Amazon. This looks like a wary animal. This is the Yukari. He's wary because a lot of primates are wary of one thing. The harpy eagle, the top eagle in the environment, feeds on monkeys and on sloths, and they're a force to be reckoned with, especially if you're in their sights and coming in and feeding their single chick. So the last chapter is of South Georgia Island, a place that I went down in 1981 for the first time. And things are changing in South Georgia Island as well. When I first went down there, there was just a handful of fur seals on one end of the island. Now there's 3 million. But with the warming of the temperatures also, there's more krill, and therefore there's more king penguins. So they're mushrooming in population. Whales are increasing in the subantarctic waters as well as more krill are breeding. It's a great place for Franz and I. We've both been down there multiple times with different projects over the years. It's, to me, it epitomizes the term primordial. It's just got millions of birds and seals and mountains and glaciers and so forth and so on. These beautiful little wieners grow up to be a grotesque largest seal on the planet. And here a Weddell seal is curiously coming up to me. Again, there was never a population of people that hunted in Antarctica, so consequently, penguins and seals are very, very approachable. They'll walk right up to you, look up at you, walk through your tripod. These are Adelie penguins. And once Adelies, or gentoos in this case, hit the water, they're also looking out for what? The leopard seal, which is a very efficient predator of these beautiful little penguins. So everything's got to eat, you know. There's no ideal environment on the planet where animals need to feed. I was fortunate to be on the first exploratory trip to find emperors on the Weddell Sea, a good 25 years ago. And these photos were taken at 2:30 in the morning, and this is, in fact, the last photo I'm sharing with you. So thank you very much.